Hey everyone, welcome back to the Revenue Engine Master podcast by ScaleStack. My name is Elio, co-founder and CEO, and this is basically like a fun podcast where we dive deeper into go-to-market, data, automation, agents, and how great operators are reshaping go-to-market and go-to-market ops. Today's guest is someone that I've been lucky to meet early in our building of ScaleStack, and his name is Roman, who recently joined Multiverse as their VP of Revenue Operations. Prior to this, Roman has led some of the best and sharpest RevOps teams out there, from MongoDB to Remote. He's also like an infrastructure architect, he's an author, public speaker, advisor to great startups. And I've always seen his deep-seated mission of simplifying complexity and aligning teams and drive scale. And I'm thrilled to have you, Roman. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Elio. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we briefly worked together when you were at MongoDB. And then I'm so grateful that you chose ScaleStack during your time at Remote. Maybe we should do something at Multiverse together. I'm looking forward to explore that. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And maybe let's start. I mean, you have built revenue engines at really cool companies, Remote, MongoDB, now Multiverse. I'm always curious about what in your early background has helped you get to today. What prepared you for this moment, basically?
Yeah, I love that. What prepared me for this moment? Well, so my background is actually in computer science. I studied computer engineering many years ago, but I pretty early realized, you know what, I'm not going to cut it as an engineer and make a living out of it. So what did I do? I ended up in consulting and strategy consulting, technology consulting, and I think there was a much better fit combining business problems with a deep understanding of technology and how it can affect business problems and improve situations and help transform business models. And yeah, from there, I somehow stumbled onto go-to-market and sales and SaaS even, almost by chance. Super lucky, right? Sometimes the best career moves happen by pure chance. And here I am, absolutely love it. And I don't know, I think I combine this understanding of technology, process, business problems, the consultative approach, the analytical mindset, and just a deep appreciation and understanding of sales together into my work now as RevOps leader. But I always make it my mission and my team's mission to really create the conditions for go-to-market teams to be successful. That's what drives me. That's what I want for my team to be driven by, and that's what we have set as our mission. Do what is needed for the business to help them succeed. If we do that part of the job, then hopefully we'll all win.
Great. And if you had to choose, I mean, you have a very, diverse career. Was it at PwC that maybe that were the seeds of what you're doing today, combining tech and systems and processes and then obviously go to market? Or was it MongoDB? Because I saw in reviewing your expertise that MongoDB seems that you made that transition. So I was curious, for me, for instance, I started management consulting too, and that was really formative for me. But it wasn't until I did start looking at entrepreneurship that really the ideas became clear to me. So I'm curious, if you had to pinpoint period in time where all of this came together, what would that be?
Yeah, I would probably pinpoint that towards my time at MongoDB early on. I joined MongoDB from management consulting at PwC, as you said, actually into a field-based role that was combining a consultative approach and kind of a pre-sales role together with product marketing. And that's when I first started to really work closely with sales and go-to-market teams and the sales leadership in particular. And that's how I then made the move into go-to-market strategy, started to work as the chief of staff for first the head of EMEA, then later on the CRO. And that's when I really, I would say, had that inflection point in my career to go from maybe a bit more of a generalist, much more towards an operator and leading and building and leading RevOps teams or sales ops teams.
Yeah, great. And so all of these, like, different industries, different growth stages, like, I don't know, like when you joined MongoDB, how many people there were at MongoDB when you joined?
Oh, I think when I joined, we were globally about 400.
Yeah, so
Yeah, something like
like
that.
probably a tenth or less than what it is now. So, but
Yeah.
like, and then you grew, and the company grew dramatically, like when you were there. And so what is like that you've learned in terms of like building at like a fast-paced startup versus like a more like sort of established, larger company?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's obviously a big difference, right, between a small and a big company. Between private companies, when I joined MongoDB, was still private, was on its way to an IPO, and then later on went public. Once companies go public, once they grow beyond a certain size, the nature changes a bit, how they operate changes. What I
Yeah.
really love about smaller companies, when MongoDB was smaller, or Remote, or Multiverse, right, or other startups that I work with more in an advisory capacity, is that they're very agile. They're not afraid to move fast. And that's one of these big things, right, that you always attribute to startups in general. They move fast, they make mistakes quickly. And I think that's a huge benefit and characteristic that helps them succeed. They can pivot much faster. They can make a decision and try something new quickly. They can roll out change much, much faster, especially if you think about, for example, sales teams. Like if you want to experiment something with a sales team, there's maybe 2, 3, 5, 10, maybe even 20 people. You can get them all into a room very easily on the same call. You can
Right.
distribute a new way of working. You can enable them on something new, a product, a process, a tool, mechanism, whatever it is, very quickly. And you can see the results. But there's also obviously a lot more risk involved because you're impacting a much smaller company with a much smaller renewal base. There's less revenue coming in. If you get it wrong, it's a very big impact for the company. There's not exactly a huge amount of resources, typically in terms of time or people to run pilots with. All of that is different in a bigger company. There's more
Yeah.
room for experimentation. There's more budget to do it, and there's maybe more of a safety net for failure. So you almost feel like you can try some riskier bets in a bigger company more easily, even though you almost need to make them in a smaller company where they can really have a huge impact. So it's almost like a weird reverse situation that's at play here. But as small companies grow bigger, what I think is super important that they don't lose their agility and their speed, and especially don't get bogged down in tons and tons of meetings and complicated decision-making processes. And that's when you kind of lose the fun a little bit also in the process. And that's when I start to lose the fun a little bit, when it gets too big, too complicated, too political. I'm not a big fan of political gameplays and those kind of things. I'm here to help go-to-market teams succeed. And once I spend more of my time managing difficult stakeholders that have different agendas and are not aligned with helping go-to-market teams do their best, then I'm starting to get a bit itchy.
Yeah. Before SkillStack, I was at AWS, and I joined AWS in 2018, and it was already a big company, but it still like retained like that crazy entrepreneurial startup vibe. And then like 4 or 5 years later, when I left, it was already very different. Not only because the
Mm.
size was much bigger, but like there were unfortunately a lot of the things that you mentioned. Like it was political in some ways, and like everything became a little bit slower. But what I'm curious is like we work in like revenues scaling companies, so like our mission is really to try and grow the company. And so what is maybe common across like smaller companies, larger companies? So what you need to do maybe in a smaller team that will prepare the company as it scales? And so what it takes like in the early innings to like say, okay, I need to do this so that I need to be prepared for when we are going to get bigger and bigger. What are those like sort of first principles that you try to implement no matter what?
I think you touched on one important thing there, really, or one that's really important to me, right? Is always being clear about why are you doing something? What are you trying to achieve? what's the underlying mission or the root cause of why you're doing certain things, right? So as you grow from small to medium to big to large, right? Like you need to make sure you're very clear about what is your mission and what is the mission for the team and how are you going to achieve that mission. And then that kind of shakes out a little bit the things that you actually do. So that I think is one of the most important things as you grow. Don't lose sight of that bigger picture because you can get bogged down in all these different initiatives and projects and technology rollouts and systems, which is all super helpful. But you really need to understand how you identify the big levers that make the biggest impact on the revenue engine, and you focus on those. And that is obviously super important if you're small, but even bigger, more important when you're big, because then you really impact a lot of revenue at that point.
Right.
Pick the stuff that is the most impactful, pick the stuff that is important, not always the stuff that's the most urgent. Don't respond to the people necessarily that shout the loudest right now, but what do you need to think about midterm, long term? And that I think is maybe on the journey from small to large company, even more important. When you're smaller, you really need to respond a bit more. You need to react a bit more to what's happening around you. Your customer or your one customer is telling you one thing, right? Like you react to that and you try to avoid that one customer leaving, right? And as you become a company with 10, with 100, with 10,000 customers, you start to anticipate maybe a bit more, and you've got the room to be a bit more proactive, reach out proactively, you think about it and have a strategy. And the same maybe applies in the go-to-market engine room or with RevOps. At the beginning, when you're small, you're a bit more responsive, but then you need to become more proactive. You need to think ahead and you need to try to plan for the future. You need to think about what are scalable ways of operating the business, what are scalable ways to support the go-to-market engine. How do you leverage the team in the most effective way? And yeah, ultimately impact the revenue in the most effective way.
Yeah, I like that, and I like what you said at the beginning that like it's very important to know the reasons why always, and like sort of
Yeah.
always try. This is a constant effort, like especially in a younger company. There is so much going on, as you said, and you are like always like reacting to something. But what I've learned is that like it's so important to step back and try to always like try to see sort of like the forest through the trees, because otherwise like your brain is gonna be just overloaded. And so why
Yeah.
are we doing this? Asking that question often to me is very important. So I love
Yeah.
that.
We also get the alignment right with the stakeholders. If we got three people in the room or 10 people, doesn't matter. If you have a different understanding of what the why is or the problem statement,
And then
you
we
have a very
share
different
that why. Yes.
understanding. You need to
Yes.
share that, right? And if
Yes.
you don't, then you have a very different understanding of what good looks like and what the right solution looks like, and whether you've been successful in the end or not, whatever you're doing, right? So it's super important to start with the shared understanding there, and make sure everybody understands the goal, and then the path towards that goal can vary and can be different, and can also change as you go along. But for every project or company growth story or product development, whatever that is that you're working on, if you don't have a good understanding of the goal, of the why, then it's a problem.
Love that. Um, Maybe let's switch gears a little bit then. I mean, it's all related, but I was thinking one of the best compliments that I've received as we are building ScaleStack was from someone that we both know, a very respected RevOps leader, James. And he told me that like since adopting ScaleStack when he was at Mongo, he had been able to become more of a product manager than actually like reacting to like, hey, like the data is bad, or like thinking about systems or processes. So like he felt that like since some of those things were like taken care of, he could like start thinking more as a product manager. And that's like it was like super insightful when he said that. And then after that, like my view has been like increasingly that RevOps, good RevOps today, is becoming more like a product function than probably how it was intended at the beginning. More like hey, we need to delegate to someone like the systems, the processes, and like solving like some issues that we have. And so I'm curious, do you agree with that? Do you think that when you think about your RevOps function?
Yeah, I think I can totally buy into that. So RevOps definitely has changed, or like the transition right from sales ops into the broader RevOps or go-to-market operations. The theme there is definitely going from a service organization or support desk function to much more of a product organization and becoming a strategic business partner yeah, I guess a strategic partner of the go-to-market teams. If you
Right.
manage to identify, okay, what are the services or the products or the solutions that we have that really impact the sales org in a positive way, and you
Mm.
manage those like they were a product that you were selling, like they were a product that you were taking into the market and actually selling to other companies, then you really switch your thinking towards being more proactive, thinking about the biggest pain points, trying to automate and scale and create efficiencies. If you don't do that and you're much more waiting for like the next ticket to come in that I have to respond to, then you go back to that reactive nature of, well, okay, small scale thinking. I just respond to what's happening today and maybe tomorrow, but I don't necessarily take that bigger picture and look ahead of where could this go? What could we need in 3, 6, 9 months time? How do I need to support my business in the future? Right. So I think that is where the shift to product orgs is coming from, and like I 100% agree that that's where good revenue organizations are moving towards.
Yeah, I like that, like switching from the ticket, handling the ticket to like actually thinking more strategically and
Yeah.
like as a product function. And so,
I mean,
what
one thing there, like anybody who's working on tickets today, right? Like there's support teams and there's also teams in my or people in my org that work on support tickets. I just want to be clear, like that is an important part of our job, and it's a part of our job that is that needs to be fulfilled. Hopefully, with more and more technology support, that part of the job is being reduced for a lot of the RevOps teams around the world,
are
and you can focus your attention and your energy on different activities. It is important. It needs to be done. We need to help people in the go-to-market teams also with their small problems, right? Hey, can't log in here. How do I do this? How do I do that? But I would always use those tickets and support requests as a good kind of window into, hey, what are the actual pain points? Can I identify a pattern? Can I step back and change the services and the products that I'm offering and then improve them, right? If you're just responding to them and just fix the symptom, but not the root cause, then you're absolutely missing a trick.
Yeah, yeah. Well, absolutely. So, like, I think that the problems are still there. It's just that I think that hopefully now technology is coming to our help to maybe automate a lot of that, like, component of the RevOps function,
Yeah.
so that, like, the leaders like you and the larger and broader teams can think more strategic. It doesn't mean that you don't have to get your hands dirty. It doesn't mean that you don't need to know the details. And I like the way you frame it, like the ticketing as like, hey, let me see where the pain points are. What are the trends? What are like the recurring things that we need to fix? My thinking is that, like, if we reduce the amount of like almost like brain power that gets devoted to solving those things, because maybe and hopefully technology comes to help, or automation or agents, however you want to do that, then we can think more strategically.
Yeah.
And so maybe like thinking about like the complexity of all of this, I see RevOps as a complex. What we said at the beginning. It's technology, it's processes, it's systems, it's like the real deep understanding of like sales and how we make money, essentially how the company generates revenues, and so like what's our ideal customer. So it's a very like multifaceted thing. So because of this complexity, like it can be challenging. And so I'm curious
Yeah.
about like if you can share a moment where like or a point in time where like things didn't go as planned, and like a moment like where you learned a lot, and what did you learn from that like problem?
Uh, yeah, sure. I mean, there's definitely a couple of war stories and battle scars there after,
Yes.
I don't know, 10 years in go-to-market now. Um, I don't know if I maybe had to pick one, like early on at Mongo, we were working on a new system for leading indicators, right? Not that that is rocket science, not that that is something completely new and people had done it before, right? So um, I thought incorrectly, well, it can't be that hard. So we built it. We built it together with the senior leadership team. They gave input, and it was beautiful, right? Like it had all the bells and whistles that you can imagine, and it looked great, and it was functioning, well, not perfectly, but like pretty well. And we thought, great, now we're ready for launching. And we put it out there. We launched it, and we sent an email. We put it on Slack, and I think we even had a launch call, right? And then we watched the adoption metrics, and they just didn't move. People were just not using it. They weren't logging in. They weren't talking about it. There were no questions about it. And it was like, well, what the hell is going on? This thing works. Like, I know this is good for you. Like, why are you not using this? And then I spent more time with some of the leaders, first and second line leaders, and some of the reps. And they gave me some feedback. And then at some point, it really dawned on me, you know what, I've missed a major trick here of how I need to engage with the sales team if I want to affect change. And that was to look at it more from their point of view, look at it from, well, what's in it for them? Like, why is this beneficial for them? Why should they change the way they work? Why should they use the system? Why should they follow a different process? And I probably had missed one of the most important, I don't know, lessons of change management at that point, right? Like, what's in it for the person that has to change? And I didn't address that enough, right? I said, like, oh, why is this so great for the senior leadership team and revenue operations and reporting and all of these important topics, right? But I didn't really address, well, what's in it for the rep? What's in it for their first line leader? Like, how is this going to help them hit their target? How is this going to help them on their day-to-day? And once I understood that, and we managed to rephrase a lot of the launch comms and the materials that we used and the enablement material around it, and we almost relaunched the thing, not necessarily as a 2.0. We didn't change the product itself. We just changed how we spoke about it and what we asked people to do and why. We saw super fast adoption, and we saw a lot of feedback. We got a lot of good improvement ideas from the users, and we were off to the races. And the structure of how that system of leading indicators was implemented still lives on today. It still lives on today at MongoDB, and it actually almost like expanded like a snowball effect to all sorts of different companies around the world, because people obviously that worked at MongoDB left at some point. ICs became leaders, leaders became senior leaders. And I've got lots of people still pinging me to this day that have gone into senior leadership positions in other companies and say, hey, can you talk to my RevOps team about how you've built this and what you've done there and why this works and what they need to do to actually replicate that for me? Right. And that just showed me, okay, at some point we got it right. But that initial lesson of, you know what, okay, like the change management was completely missed, was a hard lesson, but a very good one. So I'm trying now to avoid to repeat that. But it's really that you need to obviously also fail, right? Otherwise you don't learn from it. And it's super important to keep trying things and fail. Hopefully fail less often than you succeed, but you will fail. And the more you do and the more senior you become, probably the more often you fail almost, because you're trying more risky things and more different things. And if you're in a leadership position today in RevOps and you're shying away from taking risky bets from time to time, you're probably not pushing the boundaries hard enough. On an IC level, that's fine, but once you're a leader, you need to be bold enough to try something different, and then also not be put off if you fail, right? That's the other thing. Like, get back on the horse. Like, it's like, okay, I've learned a lesson here. Like, accept what you got wrong, learn from it, share that mistake with others so they avoid making that same mistake, and then move on and get on to the next problem.
Very insightful. I mean, I have so many questions on that. Like, you know, there is the change management. There is also like an idea of like, you know, make versus buy. I think like a RevOps team very often have to think like, what are we building inside, and maybe what do we buy, and you know, how do you make those decisions? So, like, can you share some of that, like in this specific examples? What is that you specifically decided to build, like maybe in this system, and like, was that an easy decision or like, you know?
I mean, we built that leading indicator system now almost, I don't know, maybe not quite 10 years, like, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. There weren't that many third-party applications out there that were trying to replicate that idea. A few of them are now in the market, and they might do a pretty good job for a lot of different companies. What was important for us at the time was to be able to iterate super fast. And that's always where the build option is beneficial, right? You can start tomorrow if you've got 5 people and you have some data and you want to see how you can build a dashboard that operationalizes that data. You can hash something together with Salesforce and Google Sheets or Tableau or other tools, right? Pretty quickly and test things out. Where those solutions often will fall short is once you have to scale them, the performance is lagging, availability isn't always there. Maybe access permissions are a no-go if you build it in Google Sheets, for example, right? Everybody sees everything. So once you need a bit more nuance there, once you go into a bigger company context or into a public company, there's different regulations, different rules that you have to apply. And at that point, a third-party solution might actually serve you much better because you're trying to otherwise build something with a very small RevOps team that another company with 10, 20 different engineering resources has already solved. So at that point, you switch. But certain components, for example, you always have as a third party, right? You're not going to all of a sudden maybe develop your own automated activity capture from your calendar into Salesforce. Like you're not going to do that, but you might decide to build your own dashboards because what you need right now is super simple, and you can even build it in a Salesforce report instead of buying a third-party tool that puts a bit more automation around it, a bit more bells and whistles, but you don't need that at the stage where you are. It's always dependent on the stage of the company, maybe also the maturity of the sales org and the maturity of the sales process, and then obviously also the sales motion. Like, are you more in a fast transactional SMB play? Are you looking at enterprise sales processes and motions? What are you selling? Right? Is it a consumer product? Is it an enterprise product? All of this would maybe define or decide if you're more on the build versus buy side.
Yeah. And then it's always like about the reasons why, no? So why are we doing this? What we were talking before, like, let's, step back and like, why are we doing this? And so like, maybe what can be done here? What can be maybe outsourced?
Yeah. Awesome. And also like, what business are you in, right? Are you in the business of building revenue operations tools, or are you in the business of XYZ? Right? And how many internal engineers do you ask for help to build something internal instead of, hey, build our product, and we're just buying that product in that we actually need for something internal from another company, right, that has solved that. And then you always swing back and forth between like too many systems, not enough systems, too many systems, not enough systems. Yeah. It's probably a never-ending story.
Great. You are like a month in at Multiverse, right? About a month.
Yeah,
maybe a little over.
Like
so still very early.
And
like what I've typically done joining like new teams is sort of take a lay of the land and understand like what the big problems are. I'm curious about like not necessarily what you're seeing now at Multiverse, which can be a number of things, but what are like the big pain points that you have now seen across several orgs, and that like you think it's important to solve? For instance, like we see our observation as ScaleStack is like, for instance, one end we see that people are still spending a lot of time like, manually doing things. Reps that do a lot of research, and so we call actually that like the manual work tax. That we absolutely, these are like the hidden costs that go-to-market teams have, and that sort of like create a lot of drag in what they do. Or other companies tell us about like, one of our partners is SBI Growth, and they did a study and they said like leadership, go-to-market leadership typically like is trusting their go-to-market strategy, but like feels that the data is not quite there yet. And so what are the big problems that you typically see, or that maybe you want to share like some of the things that you're doing? Like what are the big problems that you typically see and that need to be solved?
I think you touched on two probably common themes there already. One is data quality, data availability. I've seen that in different companies now, that data is there, but people often don't trust it, right? Because the data source is either not known, or they don't trust a specific source, or data was transformed in a certain way, but nobody has an idea anymore how, and all of a sudden this sits in the CRM and nobody knows anymore why, so they don't use it. And then to overcome that, you find all sorts of manual processes around that, where people export data, put them into spreadsheets, try to enrich themselves. Lots of reps are trying to build almost their own mini CRM about their accounts in a shadow system in Excel or in Google Sheets, right? And that's where you've just wasting so much time and energy across the organization, not just in the RevOps teams, but in the go-to-market teams overall, when people don't have access to the right data and don't trust the data that they have access to. And that is a huge problem, I think, that probably all RevOps teams face to some degree. And addressing that is probably one of the primary objectives for any revenue operations leader. Data drives or should drive so many decisions, right? If you think about territory management, for example, if you try any form of territory management automation and assign accounts to reps, either as a one-off at the beginning of the quarter, beginning of the year, on a rolling basis, because you've got a very fast-moving business, right? And you want to make sure that on a daily basis, they've got the right accounts, the right leads in front of them to call. You need to be able to trust the data that you have. Otherwise, you're just wasting some of your most expensive resources, which are your reps in your go-to-market engine. So you need to feed them with trusted sources of data to make the decisions and put their energy and efforts where we can get the most returns. And that, 100% is a priority for me, pretty much everywhere that I've been before and where I'm probably going to go in the future.
I like that. So like the trust issue like is key. So like as you said, like the data is there, but like people don't trust it, and then like start to like create behaviors that create inefficiency and duplication of data, and like and then the whole thing like falls apart. And so I think that that's very important. It's like it's not just about the data fidelity, but are people trusting the data, and are you giving them like that sort of trust reassuring mechanism in place to showcase that, hey, like, we're never going to be perfect, just like your spreadsheet is not perfect. But like, we can give you a sense of trust that like the data keeps improving, keeps getting better, and it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you have to be honest about that as well. Like no data source, no data provider is ever perfect, right? No matter what you do, like to get it perfect, the investment you have to put in, or any company would have to put in, is just is disproportional. Right?
Not
so you always have
that's
justifiable, disproportional. It's just there's always a certain amount of risk that there are mistakes. But if you get into situations, for example, where you develop a certain model to score accounts, great. If you don't explain that model, or if you don't build a model in a way that's easy to understand, people will already start to not trust it. If you build a model and use it, but they don't actually tell anybody you've got this model, and you just put the output of that model into your CRM and say, hey, here's a score between 1 and 100, stack rank based on that, and trust me, that's right, then people are just going to ignore that, right? You might as well just like hide that field, because they've got no idea how that score even came about, where the data went into it, how the certain components are weighted, where the data for the different components came from. And that is just not going to work. And if you then build a major process around that, like territory management or account tiering or segmentation in general, you're just going to waste a lot of opportunity potentially, right? By people not trusting your data, trying to get their own data, rerunning the same exercises again, coming up with their own models, and then doing something completely different that maybe even goes against the company strategy or sales org strategy at that point. So you have to be open, you have to be transparent, but you also have to be very critical about the data that you have and the processes that you have, and constantly review them and see, okay, how can we improve that? Where's the data quality higher? How can we segment this differently? How can we differentiate our approach? Having a global data strategy is great in theory, and having a single data provider that gives you everything is great in theory. But again, it's very unlikely to happen that you find something that works for your business. Very often you have different data quality. For example, if you focus on the US market versus the European market or the APAC market, so you might have an overlap there of vendors that in theory do the same thing, but the data quality for different geographic regions is vastly different. So you have to process your model with different inputs from different vendors based on the geography, or based on the industry, or some other segmentation that makes sense for your business. So a data strategy ideally is like one vendor and you've got it all, but it just usually doesn't work out that way. I haven't seen it work out that way yet for me, but I'd be happy to be proven wrong.
I mean, our experience is the same, that like there is no one single data source. And now also like, with AI, there's so much that you can do. And actually, I'm curious about this. Like we as SkillStack are working hard on this idea of the autonomous revenue engine. No, you just explained that like the trust in data is like, the data sources acting on the data, but then also the enablement explaining how certain models are made. So there is a lot of different things that needs to happen. We are obsessing with this idea of like autonomous revenue engine on those things that in our opinion are like that busy work, the repetitive tasks that we think should be done by machines. And so trying to remove a lot of the busy work off of the hands of the RevOps, sales ops, marketing ops teams that we work with. And so I'm curious, like, what do you see, like with AI changing everything? What do you see that like needs to be absolutely automated as much as possible in your function, RevOps? And then instead, what do you think that like needs to be done by humans?
So, for example, earlier I talked a bit about territory management, right, and data that feeds that. Enriching or ingesting data sources, 100% something that should be automated on a regular basis, right? For example, to find net new accounts, net new companies that have been founded or have been funded or that you simply didn't have in your CRM. Enriching those in a smart way, right? And that's where automation and AI engines already come into play, orchestrating all these different sources together into a way that can be trusted and where we know that, hey, phone numbers from this vendor for that region work better than from this region. Let's merge that into the lead or into the contact that we have here that we maybe have to enrich and then route. 100% an automatable task that should be given over to technology more and more. When it comes to elements like, okay, what is, for example, then our go-to-market strategy or our segmentation approach of the accounts that we now have so beautifully enriched in our system, that is probably something that we still can't quite give to an AI agent, because the context or the contextual knowledge is still not big enough. So you need to know more about how the company operates. You need to know more about maybe the types of reps that you hire. You need to know more about your product, the product roadmap, and so many different things that are just not part of that automation workflow to make a decision and decide where should I route that in the end, or who should work on that, or why are we bundling accounts in a certain way. So the strategic elements of making decisions, I think we're still a little bit further away from autonomous revenue engines doing that job. But humans will probably remain a core component here, but it's really about interpreting data, it's interpreting signals, it's making those strategic decisions and taking different sources into consideration there that maybe don't make sense yet right now for an AI agent. Right. Maybe we're not that far away from it, who knows, but there is still an element of human knowledge and context that we can't easily and at scale replicate, and again, for like justifiable cost maybe. So that's where a RevOps professional will still be in the mix. But the simpler, the lower level task of data processing, data automation, enrichment, mapping, augmentation, all of that should be a smaller and smaller and smaller portion of a person's job and should just be automated by AI and machine learning models and just computers, right? Just call it computers. Not everything that the computer does today is AI. Some of it was there 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's just automation. Today it's a bit of a buzzword. Everything is done by AI, but let's just say computers. But we need to shift that away. Definitely automate more of the tasks that can be automated. That maybe could be even automated 5 years ago, just nobody really thought about it or wanted to do it. And now we've got a new opportunity to really supercharge that shift away from the shift of busy work away from RevOps professionals to automation.
And how are you yourself spending your time today? I mean, like you're early in like Multiverse, but like how do you see like, your average day? Like how is like the time spent on different things, like maybe like leadership and teams and systems and maybe your own individual work? How are you splitting your time today?
Well, I guess I'm lucky that I get to spend my time mostly with humans and on human problems. And
Well,
that's
not
also what I
everybody
really
enjoys
enjoy.
that, so I
Well,
don't know.
maybe not, right? But like, I really enjoy, obviously, at the beginning, whenever you're at a new role at a new company, right? Like, your job is first to learn as much as you can about how the business operates, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your teams, of individuals, like, where do you have opportunities, where are things maybe not working quite as optimal as they could or should, or where have you seen things being done in a different, maybe even a better way somewhere else, and bring some of those new ideas into your new job. Um, Another big part, obviously, of my job is to develop and coach my team. Like, that's the biggest role, I think, of any senior leader, right? Like, you're not there to do the job, you're there to help others do the job even better than you ever could, help them grow and develop into a better version of themselves. And ideally, find people that can replace you very quickly, right? Because that's ultimately how you grow yourself as well. Find people that can replace your job, replace you in your job, right? And then take a bigger job, a different job, solve another problem. So that's how I want to spend most of my time, and how I also spend already a lot of my time. Time with my team, time to help them uh, solve their own problems, and yeah, become more strategic partners to the business. If I do that well, and I do that across 5, 10, 15 people, I have a much bigger impact than I could ever have if I went around the house and tried to solve the biggest problems myself, because there's just so many hours in the day that I can work myself. But if my whole team operates in a certain way, and approaches go-to-market teams in a certain way, then that's how we create leverage effect, right? That's how you really multiply your expertise. It's not by applying it yourself, but by teaching it and coaching it, and implementing it into teams and replicating it.
Yeah. Can you do that like virtually, remotely, the coaching component? I find that to be so hard
It
personally.
is hard. It is hard, but it's 100% possible. And I've definitely seen it work. I've done it myself. I've seen it work with me. Like, people have coached and mentored me remotely as well, right? You don't have to be in the same room. Obviously, there's an element that all of us kind of long for and yearn for, and like why we like sometimes coming to an office environment, or have the offsites face to face, and have some level of interaction. And for everybody, that's slightly different, right? Some people are a bit more extrovert, like they really get supercharged by being around people. And some people are a bit more like, okay, I recharge differently. I get my energy from different sources, and that's fine. Everybody's different there, and you need to work with your team and their individual preferences around that as well.
Right.
But you can 100% develop a team also in a remote environment. And right now, I'm working in a hybrid context, so that makes it a little bit easier. Certain things we just move to an async and remote way of working, and other things we definitely do face to face, because we have the opportunity to do so on a regular basis. And if you get that mix right, and it's a beautiful thing. But you can 100% do it remotely only if you have a team that is spread across all around the world, and you don't want to travel, spend a lot of time on, I don't know, planes, trains, automobiles, or spend money on it, right? It's also a huge time sink. I used to
Of
travel a
course.
lot
Of
for my
course.
job. At the beginning of my career, especially in consulting. I mean, every day you're spending time traveling, or every week. It's a lot. Later on at MongoDB, there was a lot of that as well. And even in general, right? Sales teams, leadership teams,
We
QBRs, you
try.
come together, you spend time there, you've got the offsites. Like, if you add it all up, those are days and days and days a year that you spend traveling alone. Not even speaking about like being tired and jet lagged and kind of the loss of productivity afterwards. You probably can attest to that today.
Absolutely.
Um,
Look at my.
yeah, but
Absolutely.
yeah, you can do it, and if you find a good mix there, I think then that's the best way forward.
Yeah. Very good. I saw in your career, I hadn't noticed that you spent some time at MongoDB as like being the chief of staff of the CRO. And when I was at
Yeah,
Amazon, this was a very important and coveted position for like developing leaders. For instance, Andy Jassy, who is the current CEO of Amazon, before becoming the CEO of AWS, he was like the technical advisor to Jeff Bezos, and like there is like a program to develop leaders at Amazon to sort of be like the chief of staff of like senior leaders, learn a lot, and then put those people into like leadership positions directly. Was that
Yeah.
like sort of the same thing at Mongo, or how was that position? Because when I saw that, I was very interested, and I'm curious about what you learned from that experience also.
Um, I'm not sure if that was a necessarily a programmatic approach, maybe comparable to AWS. But yes, I've spent many years working as a chief of staff to the CRO at the time, Cedric Pesch. Owe him a
He's a
huge deal of
legend.
learning, um, lots of blood, sweat, and tears working for him. No, I'm joking. Like we had a great time working, and I learned a lot from him and the senior leadership team around him. And I guess one of the biggest learnings, even going into go to market in general, but also really working with him, was that um, I learned a different appreciation for sales and go to market teams in general. Lots of companies that have sales teams, right? Or lots of people that work in a company that have a sales team, I think, have a wrong perception of sales and maybe a skewed perception of what sales does and what drives them. A lot of people think sales is just coin operated. They're only out for themselves. They only try to make as much money as possible because they maybe hear that, hey, in sales you make a lot of money in commissions and they have all these high salaries, and like how dare they, right? Like, but once you're actually on the other side of the fence there and you're working with them, you realize that sales is probably one of the hardest jobs that you can have. Certainly one of the hardest jobs that you could have in a tech company today. It's a job where you face daily, weekly, hourly rejection on a regular basis, where you have to handle objections constantly from prospects and customers, and you have to deal with all sorts of issues, from internal product issues to branding issues to delivery issues, operational issues, and you're always the man in the middle between the customer and the company. And it's not easy, right? So I have a huge amount of respect for people that work in sales and sales leadership. I certainly
You
wouldn't want to do it
frame it
myself.
beautifully. I mean, like,
It's no, like I'm serious. Like it's a really tough job, and I couldn't do it. But what I can do is help them win, right? That's what I meant when I said at the beginning, hey, I'm here to create the conditions for them to be successful. I can't do it for them. I can't force them to do certain things, but I can create the conditions for them and around them to be as successful as possible and make their job hopefully a bit easier and a bit smoother. And I think that's what I learned. That was one of the big learnings, right? That sales is not here just to be out for themselves. Like really good sales leaders, revenue leaders, CROs, right? They're not out for generating as much sales as possible. They focus primarily on how can I generate as much value for my customer as possible. And if I focus on that first and foremost, then all the revenue, all the bookings, all the sales, all the commissions will come after. They will almost come naturally or automatically. But they approach this job in a very different way. They're not in sales or in revenue generation. They're almost like in value delivery. And that's a different way of looking at it, right? And that is what really allows tech companies to grow as fast as they grow today. If you didn't have the sales engine or the go-to-market engine there, it often wouldn't work. Yes, if you have a PLG product that is directly sold via your website and all that's needed is somebody to swipe a credit card, that's great. Those companies can grow as well. They're huge. Some of them are massive, right? But once you get into an enterprise business, a B2B business, there's still humans on the other side. There's very likely still a salesperson involved. And at that point, they are focusing on value delivery and helping your customers see and optimize the value from your products. And only if they do that job really well and position the right products, the right solutions, and sell them in the right way, then you will get that retention, then you will get the growth for the company. And that's when you get more money for R&D, more people working in the company in general. You blow up these huge SaaS companies into amazing IPOs and generate these, like, I don't know, huge companies that have a great reputation and deliver beautiful products and services. So sales is not just coin operated people. Like, sales is very, very different. So that was one of the big lessons of working with the CRO, working as a chief of staff and
I
being
love
so
that.
close to all these senior
Yeah, it
leaders.
was like almost poetic the way you describe it. And
Well, it
so,
sounds a bit cheesy, but like, I'm serious. Like,
no, 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 no.
it's different
I
when you're on
thought
the
it
other
was
side, right? You've been there, you've seen it, and you've worked with
absolutely,
salespeople a lot. There's a wrong
absolutely.
perception in the market, and maybe somebody needs to, I don't know, change that a little bit. There are some black sheep around as well. I'm not going to say that don't exist, but like, at large, it's different.
Maybe my last question is like, so clearly as a RevOps leader, you deeply care and understand like for like the sales that are like your internal customers, no? How like, what would be a recommendation to like new RevOps leaders in building that relationship with their CROs, in how to explain what RevOps does and how to properly position? So obviously it's the individual responsibility of the RevOps leadership to deeply care and understand about like sales teams and marketing teams that, they support. But what about the other side? How do you like make sure that like there is a correct understanding of what RevOps does?
That's a good question. I mean, we talked about that recently with my team, and we looked at different, for example, ways to phrase what's the mission of a RevOps team, right? And you get all these great, put it into ChatGPT or Gemini or any of these tools right now, right? And you get all sorts of lofty, lengthy descriptions about processes and technology and revenue optimization. But in the end, it's still about making go-to-market teams work smoothly, effectively, and efficiently. Keep it simple, right? It's about creating the conditions for go-to-market teams to be successful, whether that is salespeople, whether that is a PLG-driven motion where we think more about self-serve engines and a very marketing-heavy optimization. Work with them to help them see that you're on their side. Work with them to identify what the biggest pain points are that they identify today. Ideally, you also come to it with an opinion and with a hypothesis, right? And hey, we think we've seen this, we've looked at the data, we've analyzed, we tried to help out here. We're finding these issues and these problems or these ideas. Identify what has the most impact, not just what's the latest shiny thing, and implement some tool or some process that you think might fix things, but you haven't gone a couple of layers deep. Find the root cause of some of the biggest pain points that you have in your go-to-market organization, help them solve that, and then the CROs and the sales leaders in your teams will see the value that you bring, and the bigger picture of why they need revenue operations. There are some tactical things there as well, but if you really focus on solving some of the bigger pain points, some of the mid or long-term issues, then I think you're on the right track there to build a strong relationship.
Very cool. Roman, this was great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for all of the insights and the examples and the war stories. So I'm really grateful, and it was great to see you. Thank you for everyone for tuning in, and stay curious, keep building, and until the next time. Thank you again, Roman.
Take care.